The Alienware m17 gaming laptop is a thin and powerful machine, but is it a laptop you should consider buying? In this review, we'll take a look at game benchmarks, performance, thermals, overclocking, battery life, and basically everything else in detail to help you decide. Starting with the specs, my unit has an Intel i7-8750H CPU, the 90W version of the NVIDIA RTX 2080 Max-Q graphics, 16GB of memory running in dual channel, a 17.3-inch 4K 60Hz IPS screen, a 512GB NVMe M.2 SSD, and 1TB SSHD. For network connectivity, it's got Gigabit Ethernet, 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth 5. Pretty much everything in the M17 can be customized though. You can also pick RTX 2060 or 2070 Max-Q graphics, 1080p or 1440p screen resolutions, single or dual channel memory ranging from 8GB to 32GB, up to dual 1TB M.2 SSDs, larger battery, and even the i9-8950HK overclockable CPU too. You can check updated prices of different configurations using the links in the description. The exterior of the laptop is made of a magnesium alloy, and it's available in Epic Silver or Nebula Red, which is what I've got here. While the interior is all matte black with a sort of rubberized material. All edges and corners were smooth, and the build quality was excellent. The average weight of the laptop is listed at 2.63 kilos on the Dell website, and I found mine to be about 2.8 kilos, rising by over a kilo with the 240W power brick and cables for charging. The dimensions of the laptop are 41cm in width, 29.2cm in depth, and about 2.3cm in height. So on the thinner side considering the powerful specs inside. This makes it a bit wider than other thin bezel 17-inch machines, resulting in 1.3cm side screen bezels with a thicker chin and top section. The plastic around the screen is glossy too, so it easily shows fingerprints when you touch it. The 17.3-inch 4K 60Hz 400 nit screen I've got here looks excellent, and would be great for photo or video editors. The first thing I noticed was how good the colors looked. If you're buying the laptop for gaming, you could always run games at 1080p with the 4K screen to improve performance. Otherwise, you can also get the M17 with a 60Hz 1080p IPS panel or 120Hz 1440p TN panel. I'm not sure why there's no high refresh rate 1080p option. At the moment, it looks like the only high refresh rate option is the 120Hz 1440p TN panel. I've measured the color gamut of the 4K panel using the Spider 5 Pro, and my results returned 100% of sRGB, 93% of NTSC, and 98% of Adobe RGB. Very nice results. At 100% brightness in the center, I measured 386 nits with an 800:1 contrast ratio. So not quite the 400 nits specified, but above average for a laptop nonetheless. I've taken a long exposure photo in a dark room as a worst case backlight bleed test, and there were a few imperfections, none of which I could personally notice while viewing darker content. However, this will vary between laptop and panel. All screen tests here only apply to the 4K panel. Expect different results with the 1080p or 1440p options. There was only a little screen flex. Overall, it was quite solid as it's fairly thick, and it's got two wide hinges between the center and edges. Despite having some weight to it, it was not possible to open up with one finger, and I did notice that it was more back heavy, though still stable on my lap. The camera is found above the display in the center. The camera looks pretty good as it's 1080p, while most others are 720p. It sounds okay, but not excellent, but it does an okay job at isolating the fan noise. The keyboard has 1.4mm of key travel and RGB backlighting in 4 different zones, which can be customized through the Alienware Command Center. The lighting looks alright, and even the secondary key symbols get lit up. Pressing the keys down felt a little shallow, though they did seem quiet. And here's how typing sounds to give you an idea of what to expect. The only problem I personally had with the keyboard was the smaller arrow keys, which did get annoying due to mispresses while playing some games. Above the keyboard, there appears to be some vents and more of the glossy plastic that surrounds the display. The power button is in the center and lights up. There is some customization here. You can select the color when fully charged, a different color to show that it's charging, and another for sleep. The touchpad uses precision drivers and worked fine. It clicks down anywhere when pressed and has left and right buttons toward the bottom. I thought it was perhaps a little small given the size available. There was almost no keyboard flex, even while pushing down hard. Overall it was solid, and the wrist rest areas seemed even sturdier. The rubberized black matte interior did alright at hiding fingerprints and smudges, and was easier to clean than I expected, while the lid hid basically all fingerprints. On the left, there's a Noble Wedge security slot, air exhaust vent, gigabit Ethernet port, USB 3 Type-A port, and 3.5mm combined audio jack. On the right, there are two USB 3 Type-A ports and air exhaust vent. So it looks like Dell are trying to minimize extruding cables where most people would place their mouse hand. There's more on the back, air exhaust vents in the corners, then from left to right the power input, HDMI 2.0 and mini DisplayPort 1.3 outputs, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port with Thunderbolt 3, which is also wired for DisplayPort 1.2, and an Alienware graphics amplifier port with 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 3 for using an external graphics card. Meanwhile on the front, there's nothing at all. On the lid in the center towards the top, there's the Alienware logo with RGB lighting, and this can be controlled through the Command Center software, in addition to the keyboard and power button. Underneath, it was all smooth, with the exception of the intake vents towards the back for the fans. The two speakers are found down towards the front. They get fairly loud, sound good, and there was some bass present, although I found them a bit muffled at higher volumes. Here's what we're looking at with maximum volume while playing music, and LatencyMon didn't seem to think it was great. The bottom panel can easily be removed with a Phillips head screwdriver. There are 10 screws underneath and 2 more on the back. Once inside from left to right, we've got the single 2.5-inch drive bay, 2 M.2 slots, both of which apparently support PCIe and SATA, 2 memory slots, Wi-Fi card up the top above the heat pipes, and battery down the bottom right. Powering the laptop is a 60 watt-hour battery, however you can upgrade to a larger 90 watt-hour battery at the expense of no 2.5-inch drive bay. I've tested the lowest 60 watt-hour option with the screen brightness at 50%, background apps disabled, and all RGB lighting off. While just watching YouTube videos, it lasted for 3 hours and 29 minutes, and it was using the Intel integrated graphics in this test with NVIDIA Optimus. While playing The Witcher 3 with medium settings and NVIDIA's battery boost set to 30 FPS, the battery lasted for 1 hour and 4 minutes all up, and it was running with a solid 30 FPS the entire time without dipping. Battery life was about average in gaming, but not great outside of gaming. So if you're after more, consider the 90 watt-hour upgrade option. The 240 watt power brick mostly seemed to be adequate. However, in some games after a while, I did find the battery to still drain slowly. This may not be an issue with lower specs though, but depends if they sell it with different sized power bricks. Let's move on to thermal testing. As a reminder, on the bottom of the laptop, there are just air vents up the back, directly above the intake fans. There were also a couple of heat pipes shared between the processor and graphics, so a change in temperature of one of these will affect the other. The Alienware Command Center software allows you to select from different performance modes, and I've tested using a mixture of balanced and a custom version of the performance profile. By default, the performance and balanced profile performed exactly the same in my tests, so I slightly tweaked the performance profile to run with the fans at max speed, as the performance profile didn't do this by default. Thermal testing was completed with an ambient room temperature of 23 degrees Celsius, so expect different results in different environments. I've tested idle down the bottom with the quiet profile, and the temperatures were quite warm. Gaming was tested by playing Watch Dogs 2, as I find it to use a good combination of processor and graphics. The stress test results are from running the Ada64 CPU stress test and Heaven benchmark at the same time to fully load the system. In all of the tests, the CPU, shown by the blue bar, was power limit throttling with a 35 watt TDP, while under these combined CPU and GPU loads, and I was not able to raise it. The graphics were thermal throttling in almost all tests at 86 degrees Celsius. This could only be removed by using the Thermaltake Massive 20 cooling pad. These are the average clock speeds for the same tests just shown. With the gaming tests, there was no change to the CPU clock speed by boosting the fan speed, as it was power limit throttling rather than thermal throttling. However, we do see an improvement to the graphics, as that was thermal throttling. We only get a CPU improvement when applying a minus 0.13 volt undervolt, shown by a UV on the graph, getting to 3.5 GHz in Watch Dogs 2. While under stress test, even with all the improvements in place, including maximum fan speed, CPU undervolting, and a cooling pad in use, we're still about 600 MHz below the full 3.9 GHz all-core turbo speed of the i7-8750H due to power limit throttling. However, we were able to improve the GPU clock speeds quite a bit and remove thermal throttling there. These are the clock speeds I got while just running CPU-only stress tests without any GPU load. With the Ada64 stress test running, it was possible to hit the 3.9 GHz all-core turbo speed of the i7 with the CPU undervolt in place. However, we were almost reaching full performance at stock. This is because under a CPU-only workload, the CPU was able to run at a constant 60 watt TDP, although it was power limit throttling intermittently, which is why the full clock speed wasn't hit in this test. These are the temperatures for the same tests just shown. with the CPU undervolt not only performing better, but also running 14 degrees cooler too, and the CPU was now averaging a 44 watt TDP. To demonstrate how this translates into performance, I've got some Cinebench CPU benchmarks here. There's no difference to the single core results, as this isn't enough load to cause any throttling. There was a little improvement in multi-core with the undervolt applied, as it both runs cooler and without the power limit being hit. Here are the GPU-only clock speeds, while under a graphical-only stress test. And there's basically no point overclocking here, because the temperatures show that the graphics are still thermal throttling at 86 degrees even under a graphical-only load. Without the CPU being stressed, GPU throttling was still hit, not great. As for the external temperatures, where you'll actually be putting your hands, at idle with the silent profile, it was warm. 30 degrees is about normal, but we're hitting 40 in the center with the M17. While gaming, it was quite warm now, reaching the mid-50s in the center, making the keys uncomfortable, though cooler out towards the sides of the keyboard. Similar results were seen with the stress tests running, and then with the fan maxed out and the CPU undervolted, it lowered just slightly. While gaming on battery power, the wrist rest and touchpad area warms up a bit, as the battery is directly below. As for the fan noise produced by the laptop, I'll let you have a listen to some of these tests. At idle, it was fairly quiet. However, the fan did slightly ramp up a little at times, fluctuating between 1 decibel or so. While gaming or running the stress test with balanced mode, it wasn't too loud compared to other laptops. And we can see the performance mode wasn't affecting fan speed as discussed previously. Only my custom manual profile was able to fully max out the fans, though even this didn't boost them much. And the total volume level was a little quieter when compared to many other laptops I've tested under the same loads. Overall, the Alienware M17 is a hot machine, at least with this high-end configuration I've got here. I can't speak for the 2060 or 2070 Max-Q options without testing. It is also available with the overclockable i9-8950HK CPU, and while it may perform better, I would be concerned about adding even more heat into an already thermal throttled system. Granted, the CPU wasn't thermal throttling in my testing due to the 35 watt TDP limit in combined CPU and GPU workloads such as gaming, but as there are shared heat pipes, dumping in additional heat would likely further lower the performance of the 2080 Max-Q, as that's already thermal throttled in most of my testing. Even in GPU-only testing without CPU load, the graphics were thermal throttling, which was not good and not something I often see. However, I was at least happy to see that the CPU can run much higher with a 60 watt TDP when under a CPU-only load. It's not just hard capped to one level like we saw with the MSI GE75, and can change based on the workload. As the fan noise was quieter compared to other laptops I've tested, I do wonder if perhaps they should have used more powerful fans to combat the high temperatures. The biggest thing we could do to improve performance was add in a cooling pad. CPU undervolting and raising the fan speed did help a little, but the act of raising the laptop up and blowing in cool air helped the most. Finally, let's take a look at some gaming benchmarks. My M17 has a 4K screen, but it's also available with 1080p and 1440p options. I've focused my testing on 1080p, but have also tested some games at 4K where it made sense, as 4K is honestly too demanding for laptops even with this level of hardware in most games, unless you're happy with low settings. Unfortunately, I couldn't fairly test 1440p here, as I could not set that resolution natively on my 4K laptop screen. I tested by connecting an external monitor, which did work at 1440p. However, this would show unrealistic performance, as it bypasses the Intel integrated graphics that are used with NVIDIA Optimus, resulting in higher FPS than what you'd actually see using the laptop with a native 1440p screen. So with that in mind, let's get onto the benchmarks. I've tested these games with these NVIDIA drivers and all available Windows updates to date installed. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode and not in multiplayer mode, as it's easier to consistently reproduce the test run. The purple bars show the results with ray tracing disabled, while the green bars show RTX on. The RTX results were good for medium and low, at least for a laptop, and it actually played okay with RTX on at high and ultra. Although for a first-person shooter game, personally I'd want more FPS and stick to RTX off. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest possible values, as it doesn't have predefined setting presets. Even with all settings at maximum, over 100 frames per second was still possible, with 23% higher average frame rate with all settings at minimum, and a 24% increase to 1% low. Far Cry New Dawn was tested with the built-in benchmark, and over 100 FPS was possible at low settings, with 80 just achievable at ultra settings in this test. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature, and even with max settings, over 100 FPS was easily possible in this well-optimized game. As this game could reach high frame rates, I've also given it a go at 4K, and medium settings or below were required to average above 60 FPS, although it was still playable at higher. Overwatch is another well-optimized game, and was tested in the practice range, as other players, bots, and even different maps in actual gameplay affect the frame rate, and this allows for consistent testing. The 300 FPS frame cap wasn't hit here, however the results are still extremely high. Overwatch was also tested at 4K, due to the high frame rates we just saw, and even at epic settings, 60 FPS averages were still possible. During my testing, I found it to play fine here. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, with good results seen for this test. Low settings were required to hit 100 FPS, though average frame rate was still good for this test at highest settings. Ahead of most other laptops I've tested, as expected thanks to the 2080 Max-Q graphics. CSGO was tested using the Electrical FPS benchmark, and as always I was getting very high frame rates from this esports title, though not too much of a difference between all settings at medium or low. I also tested this game at 4K, given as an esports title it runs with high frame rates, and the results here should at least be playable, but if you're playing competitively you won't be using 4K anyway. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and as a game, I found a benefit from Nvidia's new Turing architecture. The frame rates are super high as expected. However, it's worth noting I always use the defaults the built-in preset set, so 50% render scale and TAA. PUBG was tested using the replay feature, and almost 100 FPS averages were possible at ultra settings. However, there wasn't really much of a difference at the lower levels. The results were decent, but not great. The Asus Scar 2 with RTX 2060 beat it in average FPS with the exact same replay file, though I suspect it would be a different story at higher resolutions. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the built-in benchmark, and I was seeing some nice results for this test, with 60 FPS possible here at very high settings, and still acceptable results maxed out, given this doesn't need a high frame rate to play. Dota 2 was tested playing in the middle lane with an average amount of action going on, and it was running very smoothly without any problems at all. Not surprising, given it runs on just about anything and we've got some powerful hardware here. Watch Dogs 2 is a resource-intensive game, but despite this, even ultra settings was able to average above 60 FPS, which is plenty, given this is a game that I think runs perfectly fine with a solid 30 FPS. The Witcher 3 was also running very well with Hairworks disabled, and once again, even ultra settings were capable of reaching above 100 FPS averages, with much higher possible at lower settings. I've tested 20 games in total in the dedicated gaming benchmark video. Check the card in the top right corner if you want to see more game tests. Let's also take a look at how the M17 compares with some other laptops to see how it stacks up. Use these results as a rough guide only, as they were tested at different times with different versions of Nvidia drivers. In Battlefield 5, I've got the M17 up the top shown by the red bar, and out of this random selection of laptops, it's performing second best. Higher than the 2070 Max-Q, but not quite as good as the 2080 Max-Q found in the Asus GX701 laptop due to the thermal throttling. Here are the results from Far Cry 5 with ultra settings, and similar results here too. While the 1% lows are the same as the other 2080 Max-Q laptop, the GX701, the average frame rates aren't quite as high, again due to suspected throttling on the GPU. However, despite this, still ahead of the others and performing pretty well. These are the results from Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings, and the results follow the same trend as the other games, with the M17 second highest out of the selection of laptops, but again, not able to catch the GX701 with equivalent specs. Despite the lower results from the throttling noted earlier, the overall performance of the M17 is good, easily able to run these games at 1080p with high settings no problem. 1440p with higher settings should work pretty well too if you're going for the 120Hz TN panel option. But unfortunately, as discussed, I couldn't test 1440p here. Even with the good specs here, I don't think this is a 4K capable gaming laptop. 4K is just too demanding unless you're only playing less demanding games like the ones covered. However, you can always get the 4K screen and run games at 1080p without problem, like I did here. Or the graphics amplifier is another option. You can check the link in the description if you want to see how that helps. Now for the benchmarking tools. I've tested Heaven, Valley, and Superposition from Unigine, as well as Firestrike, TimeSpy, Port Royal, and VRMark from 3DMark. Just pause the video if you want a detailed look at these results. As we saw earlier, we've got the option of using a cooling pad, overclocking the graphics, and undervolting the CPU to increase performance. So let's see how these changes actually help in gaming. Far Cry 5 was tested using the built-in benchmark at 1080p. I've got the stock settings shown in purple, the results from applying the same -0.13 volt CPU undervolt and 100 MHz GPU overclock as before in red. Then the green bar has the same tweaks but with the cooling pad in use. At higher settings, there's basically no change between the red and purple bars due to the GPU throttling. However, the CPU undervolt seems to help improve performance slightly at lower settings, where we're less GPU bound. The green bar is performing the best in terms of average frame rates, as the graphics are now able to perform better as the cooling pad helps remove the GPU thermal throttling. At ultra settings with the cooling pad in use, we're seeing 6% higher average FPS than without it. I've used Crystal DiskMark to test the storage, and the 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD that was installed was offering good read speeds and lower writes, while the 1TB 5400 RPM SSHD was performing about as well as expected. However, expect different speeds if you pick different drives. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as prices will change over time. At the time of recording, in the US, they don't currently seem to have the exact specs I've got here. The closest is the one with i9 CPU for around $3,450 so the i7 would be less. Here in Australia, they've got the configuration I tested with, which goes for around 5,000 Australian dollars. So as expected, quite expensive for a machine with high-end hardware in a thinner package. This is about what the Asus Zephyrus S GX701 is going for with the same specs. However, as we saw in the game comparison graphs earlier, the Zephyrus is performing better with the same hardware as it's not thermal throttling. In terms of raw performance, the Zephyrus is certainly looking better for the money. However, the M17 does have other options that the Zephyrus doesn't, including upgrade to a larger battery and 1440p or 4K screens. So which you should pick depends on your needs. Let me know if you want to see a dedicated comparison video between these two. So what did you guys think about the Alienware M17 gaming laptop? Overall, I thought it was a well-built machine. The materials certainly feel premium and there's little flex. Considering the powerful hardware inside, the laptop is on the thinner side of what's currently available. There are also a lot of different customizations you can make. Some of these include RTX 2060, 2070 Max-Q, or 2080 Max-Q graphics, 1080p, 1440p, or 4K screen resolutions, single or dual channel memory ranging from 8GB to 32GB, up to dual 1TB NVMe M.2 SSDs, 60 or 90 Wh battery, and the i7 8750H or i9 8950HK CPU. There are also a fair amount of customizations you can make with the RGB lighting, including the logo on the back of the lid, power button, and the 4-zone keyboard. However, it would have been nicer to have per-key lighting control at this price point. The 4K screen in my unit looked excellent. I could tell straight away after turning it on that it was a cut above the rest, and this was confirmed after running my usual tests. So certainly a good option for a video or photo editor with the power to back it up. It's not just all about gaming. Despite its thinness, the overall size isn't exactly small for a 17-inch laptop in terms of width and depth, and I know many people don't like the thicker glossy screen bezel. I was a bit confused that Dell only seemed to offer 1080p 60Hz IPS or 1440p 120Hz TN panels for gamers. The higher refresh rate 1440p is definitely welcome. Not many other companies provide that option, but I would have liked to have seen the now standard 144Hz 1080p option. Like the M15 I've previously reviewed, the major problem that I had was thermal throttling, in this case on the graphics card. It's hard to say how this would differ with the lower powered 2070 Max-Q or 2060 graphics without testing them, but performance was definitely kneecapped in my unit from hot temperatures. We were able to make some tweaks, such as raising fan speed and undervolting, but when it came down to it, using a cooling pad provided the biggest performance improvement, though that's less of a portable solution. Even with out-of-the-box settings though, performance in gaming was still quite good, as we've seen. These high-end specs also saw some battery drain with the 240W power brick in some games, and I'd expect this to be worse with the i9 version, unless that comes with a larger brick. I'm not sure what size the 2060 and 2070 Max-Q versions come with. It may not be an issue there. When it comes down to it, for the price, purely for gaming, I think I'd personally be looking at something else like the Asus GX701, with the same specs but better performance and cooling. But it of course depends on your requirements. The higher color gamut and brightness of the 4K screen in the M17 will be tempting for those that use their laptop for things other than gaming. Let me know what you guys thought about the Alienware M17 gaming laptop down in the comments. And if you're new here, get subscribed for future laptop videos like this one.